is to get rid of that leading coefficient or move the 3. It doesn't matter which one you do first, but either one of the two. I'll go ahead and divide everything by 2 so that I have x squared minus, and this is where it's going to be a little bit easier if you keep the fractions instead of trying to turn them into decimals. 1/2 x minus 3 over 2. I'll go ahead and move this over to the side because that's a bad c, right? Definitely not a perfect square. X squared minus 1/2 x. I'm going to leave a blank for my good c and a blank for my good c here. So instead of dividing by 2 to find the good c, I'm going to multiply by 1/2 and then square it. Because I don't want to divide a fraction. I would rather multiply by a reciprocal. So that's 1/4 squared, which is what? 1/16. And it's going to go here, and it's going to go here. Remember, it's b, so it's b over 2. So instead of saying 1/2 over 2, I just said, bless you, 1/2 times 1/2. You can multiply by the reciprocal of that. That makes it a little easier to work with. I would definitely take out my calculator, and I would do this on the calculator and then do a math enter. And you'll see why in just a minute, why I want to keep it as a fraction. 3 over 2 plus 1 over 16, math enter, and I get 25 over 16. And if you notice, both 25 and 16 are perfect squares. That's probably, in fact, it is going to come into play in just a minute. When I factor the left side, what's the square root of x squared? What sign goes in the middle? Minus, what's the square root of 1 over 16? 1/4. It always comes back to what you had in here. Squared equals, and then of course the 25 over 16. Y'all all okay there? Okay. Square root. So I have x minus 1/4 equals, what's the square root of 25? What's the square root of 16? And this is plus or minus. Now add the 1/4 to both sides. So I get 1/4 plus or minus 5 over 4. And I do want to split those up into 2 since they are like terms. I can combine them. So I'm going to have 1/4 plus 5/4, which is 6/4, or 3 over 2, whichever one you prefer. And then 1/4 minus 5/4, negative 4 over 4, which is yes. Number 6, 4x squared plus 24x equals negative 35. What I'm probably going to do is go ahead and divide by 4. I know I told you to make it equal 0 first, but there's no way 35 divided by anything is ever going to be a perfect square. So I'm just going to leave that over there on the other side, and I have x squared plus 6x equals negative 35 over 4. And I'm going to leave it just like that. Plus something, plus something. I need to know what that something is. What is that something? That's exactly right, 9. Again, I'm going to use my calculator here. And I'm going to say negative 35 over 4 plus 9. And then I'm going to do math, enter, enter. So the left side factors is x plus 3 squared. And this is 1/4, positive 1/4. Square root. What's the square root of 1/4? 1/2. That's exactly right. 1/2. Plus or minus 1/2. Because the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. And then I just move that 3 over. So I have -3 plus or minus 1/2. And I want to split that into my two answers. -3 plus 1/2 would be -2.5, or -5/2, or -2.5. Any of those are acceptable. And -3 minus 1/2 would be -3.5, or -7/2, or -3.5. Any of those answers are fine. Yes? Y'all good? No? Where'd I lose you? So -3 plus 1/2 would give me, if I'm right. Yes. Y'all good there? We're completing the square. They're completing the square too. They're doing good. What else on your homework? 12. I heard 12. Could be. All right. I'm going to go ahead and make this equal 0. So I'm going to add 87 to both sides. 2x squared, just because there's multiple constants here. 16 here is 176. Is that right? What y'all got? Everybody gets divided by 2. So I have x squared minus 10x plus 84. Is it 88? 2 into 176. 88, yeah. What's your question? I'm sorry. You got it? You sure? Is everybody okay? Okay. Now, good C or bad C here? Bad, because it's not a perfect square. So now I have x squared. Y'all thought this one was hard? Just at the end. Okay. So good C. What's my value that goes in the hole? 25. Is it because it's a complex number or an imaginary number? X minus 5 squared equals -63. So I square root. There you go. That's right. I've got the I, right? And then I have 9 and 7. Throw that plus or minus there. So x minus 5 equals plus or minus 3i times the square root of 7. And now add that 5 over to the other side. You got it right? Good. Huh? Me? I did get it right. It'd just be 6i, plus or minus 6i. Yep. Okay. All right, you got x plus 7 squared equals 50. That's right. Yes. No, you have to leave it written this way because if any number has a radical hook to it, you don't combine it with a whole number. So you just leave it just like that. The 5 and the 2 are connected here, but you can't add these two numbers together. Okay, I did that on it. Yeah. 8. Um, 5x squared plus 14x equals 3. I'm going to go ahead and divide everybody by 5. This is another nasty fractional problem, but if you keep it as the fraction, it'll make it a little bit easier on you. So I have x squared. All right, guys, if y'all need me to work them, I'm happy to work them, but if you don't need them, then we're going to keep going. Okay. Instead of dividing 14/5 by 2, I'm going to multiply it by a half. No wonder y'all didn't like this one. And I'm going to square it. I get 14 over 10, and I'm going to go and reduce that before I square. So I'm going to do 7/5 squared. 49 over 25. When I factor the left, square root of the first sign, and the square root of the last, which is 7 over 5. Again, I'm doing this strictly on my calculator. 3 over 5 in parentheses plus 49 over 25 in parentheses. Enter math, enter, and I get 64 over 25, which seems terrible, but both 64 and 25 are perfect squares. So when I square root, what's the square root of 64 over 25? 8 over 5. So I've got plus or minus 8/5. And now I just have to move that 7/5 over. So if I add, I get 1/5. And if I subtract, I get negative 15 over 5, which is negative. And I heard somebody say I did it all in decimals, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't always work is if you've got something like 2/3, this 0.66666 repeating, then you round it off. Well, all of a sudden your nice number that was a perfect square is no longer a perfect square when you're in decimals because you made a rounding error there. Because it's b over 2, so b over 2 is the same thing as 1/2 times b. Whichever one's easiest for you to do. So if it's in a fraction, I'll probably always try to do the 1/2 times the b. Yeah. X plus 1 squared equals negative 36. So when you do the square root there, I've got x plus 1 equals plus or minus 6i. When I move that 1 over, you can't combine it with that, so you just write negative 1 plus or minus 6i, and you leave it just like that. Anything else? All right. This whole chapter is all about solving quadratics, right? So when everything else fails, I can't factor and solve. I'm struggling to complete the square because it's a super nasty equation or whatever it is. I can't graph it because it's not nice even zeros. Everything else fails. The quadratic formula always works. It's always, but it's messy, so it's always a last resort. But it's one of those things that'll work for everything. So here's what it looks like. Now remember, this works, the equation that I'm fixing to give you, is when your quadratic is in standard form. What does standard form mean? That's right. Ax squared plus bx plus c and it equals 0. That has to happen. As soon as that happens, you can use quadratic formula and it will tell you what x equals. And those are my solutions, my zeros, my roots, my x-intercepts. All that means the exact same thing, right? Say right, because that's right. Thank you. X equals opposite b. Now I wrote negative b, but I said opposite b, just like in the other, whenever we were doing the vertex form, because if it starts out negative, it changes it to positive. If it starts positive, it changes to negative. So opposite b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and the whole thing gets divided by 2a. It's a long and complicated formula, but again, it always works. Okay. I'm going to do an example with you, and outside of that, this is a plug and chug. It turns out to be pretty easy to work with. It's just the simplification that students get mixed up on. So we'll talk about some ways and the order that we need to simplify here. But let's look at number 4 on the front of your sheet. Negative 2x squared plus 3x. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you guys have seen quadratic formula before. Is that correct? Y'all see it in Algebra 1? At least see it. Maybe you don't know how to use it or work with it, but you've at least seen it or heard of it before. All right, so I need to make sure it equals 0. Make sure it's in standard form, so I'm going to move everything. This time it doesn't matter what you move. If your first one is negative, it doesn't matter. Quadratic formula still works. It always works as long as you set it equal to 0. So I'm going to move, I think I'll move these to the other side. So minus 4x, make sure you put what goes together together. That's a constant, there's no x on it, so. All right, so negative 2x squared minus x plus 15 equals 0. What is your a here? Negative 2. What's your b? What's your c? All I'm going to do is take that quadratic formula and plug in. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So opposite b, which would be 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Where? Here? AC. Oh, good grief. Yes, please do. That's Mr. Freeman. I hear him from here. Okay. All right. AC. I just rewrote the formula. You don't have to rewrite it. I just wanted it referenced there. All right, work under the radical first. Always work under the radical first, because that radical's grouping things together just like a parenthesis. So I have 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared is what? 1. Watch your signs. Minus 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And negative 8 times 15 is negative 120 over negative 4. Y'all okay? What's 1 minus negative 120? That's right, 121. What do you notice about 121? It's a perfect square. So this becomes 1 plus or minus 11 over -4. And anytime you see that plus or minus, now they're not going to, a lot of times this will be as far as you can go, because if this weren't a perfect square, I would just stop. And this would be my answer. But because it's a perfect square, I'm going to take it just a bit further and say, I'm going to break this into my two answers because of the plus or the minus, right? So x could be 1 plus 11 over 4, or x could be 1 minus 11 over 4. 12 over 4, which is 3, or -10 over 4, which is -5 over 2. Still get 2, huh? Oh, I forgot. Thank you. So that's -3, and that's positive 5 over 2. Thank you. Does anybody think that's hard? Is everybody okay with that? And remember, when I get here, if this is not a perfect square, I stop. Or maybe it's the square root of 50 and I break it up into 25 and 2, which is 5 root 2. And then I leave that there. Any of that is, those still apply those rules. But other than that, it's plug and chug. Everybody okay with that? All right. I'm not going to do any more of that because that's really easy. I'm not doing the discriminant part. I'll save that for later because I really want to talk about your extra credit project. So your homework again tonight will be the second page 1 through 12 instead of the first page. Now look at your extra credit. This is my baby. I've been doing this for a lot of years with this extra credit, and I get some really, really, really great stuff. Let me tell you what I expect, what you have to do if you do it, and then I'll show you as many examples as I can. I think, do y'all have enrichment here today? So I can even show you a couple during enrichment if you want to keep watching a couple videos, or maybe we'll pick up some more tomorrow to show you some more examples. I'll show you good ones and I'll show you bad ones. Then you know. So you're gonna, the key to quadratic formula is memorizing the formula. That's all there is to it. I had a teacher, when I learned it in high school, she taught us a song with it, and so I thought instead of me teaching you a song, you come up with your own song and your own way to remember. And everybody always says they didn't want to do the project, but the ones who did it always remember the formula. The ones who don't struggle to remember it. So it really is it really will help you to remember it. All right, so here are the rules. You can work together or alone. Oh, I told you 3 students. You can have up to 4 in your group. Now, everybody has to have a part in the video. You cannot just say you worked with a group. You cannot just be standing in the video and get a free 100 test grade, because that's what this is. It's a major grade. It's 100 points. If you do it and follow the rules, you get it. If you don't follow the rules, you just don't get it. Okay? So it's 100 or nothing at all, but it's not going to hurt you, okay? But that's pretty big. That's pretty big. Y'all know how major grades work in here. Your quiz today was 24 major points. This is 100 major points. That's huge, okay? All right. Everybody has to have a part. Your song must be at least 30 seconds in length. It can be long.